Okay, this video is on slope-intercept forms. Our essential question: what is slope-intercept form of an equation, and how do we use it to graph linear equations? So let's take a look at what slope-intercept form is. Y equals mx plus b. So this format is slope-intercept form. So an equation that would be in slope-intercept form would be something like y equals 2x plus 4. That is slope-intercept form. Now the parts, if you notice in my example, I have numbers and variables. So our variables are the x and y, and then the letters m and b will typically be numbers in an actual equation. So let's look at what those represent. The m is the slope. Note it is the m all by itself that is the slope, not the x. The x is not part of that. So if I asked you to identify the slope, you would tell me that the slope is m equals 2. 2 is my slope. Then we've got the b part. So the b is the y value of the y-intercept. So if I ask you to identify the y-intercept, in our example, you would tell me that's 0, 4. You have to give it to me as an ordered pair. Remember, the definition of a y-intercept is the point where the line crosses the y-axis. Therefore, you have to give me a point as an answer. So the answer to the y-intercept would be 0, 4. And that 4 comes from this spot right here. Okay, and that's where that 4 comes from. So let's take a look at an example. It says identify the slope and y-intercept of the line. So it's a similar example to the one we just did. And I have a couple of steps over here. So first, you want to solve for y. So you have to get the y by itself. That's the idea behind slope-intercept form, that you have the y by itself equal to an equation, an expression on the other side of the equal sign. So y equals, it has to be in that format. So the equation is x plus 3y equals 9 minus the x on both sides. You got 3y equals negative x plus 9. The y is still not yet by itself. There's a 3 in front of it. We have to get rid of that 3. So since this is a 3 times y, the opposite would be to divide. So you divide everything by 3. So y equals negative 1/3 x plus 3. Now we can identify, our second step, now we can identify what our slope and y-intercept are. So the slope, again, is the number in front of the x. So in this case, the slope is negative 1/3. Then our y-intercept, so the y-intercept is a point where the line crosses the y-axis. So that would be 0, 3. And then that would be the solution to this problem, identifying the slope and y-intercept of the line. Now we're going to look at graphing. So we've done some graphing before. We've done some graphing with a table, and we've done some graphing with x and y-intercepts. Now we're going to learn how to use the slope and the y-intercept to graph. So we have an equation, x plus 2y equals 4. So our first step, rewrite in slope-intercept form. So you have to rewrite the equation just like we did in the previous example. So you take our equation, x plus 2y equals 4, minus the x on both sides. So I have 2y equals minus x plus 4. Now we have to get rid of this 2, so divide by 2. Everything gets divided by 2. And you have y equals negative 1/2 x plus 2. Simplify everything as much as you can. So once you have rewritten your equation, you need to identify what the slope and the y-intercept are. So my slope, remember, is the number in front of the x. So m equals -1/2. My y-intercept, the point where the line crosses the y-axis. So this gives me the y value. So I write my ordered pair, 0, 2. That's the y-intercept, the point where the line crosses the y-axis. So now, how do we use that information? Start by plotting the y-intercept. So I'm going to plot the y-intercept. So my y-intercept is 0, 2. So remember, you start at the origin in the center, 0, 2. Your point should be on the y-axis. It is the y-intercept, so it should intersect the y-axis. So I start at 0, 2, plot the y-intercept. Next, we're going to use the slope to plot another point. We're actually going to use it to plot multiple points. And this is a general rule that you can use. It can work other ways, but if you remember this, then the other ways will be easier to follow. So I always put on the top, so let's look at what our slope was. It was -1/2. So we use the negative with the top number. That determines whether we're going up or down. If the number is positive, you would go up that many spaces. If the number is negative, then you would go down that many spaces. So if we look at our slope, the top number is -1, which means we go down 1 space. Now when I say we go down 1 space, you have to start at the y-intercept that you already plotted. That's where you start. So you put your pencil on 0, 2, that point. We go down 1 space, so you're going down 1 space. Then we do the bottom. If the negative or positive goes with the top number, you're always going to go to the right on the bottom. So we're going to go right 2. So I went down 1, right 2. So that's where my next point is going to go, right there. So down 1, right 2. Now once you've gone down 1, right 2 once, you can go down 1, right 2 again until you run out of room on your graph. Now to get more points, we went down right, you can do everything the opposite. Down right, the opposite is up left. Up left. And you're using the same numbers, 1, 2. Okay, your points should be in a nice straight line. Next, draw a line through the points and label the equation on that line. So we draw a line through the points, all the way through. The points and the line should extend the size of your graph. And you're going to write the equation of the line on the graph. So x plus 2y equals 4. And that's how you graph using slope and y-intercept. So quick recap, rewrite your equation, make sure it's in slope-intercept form. Identify your slope and your y-intercept. Plot the y-intercept first, then you're going to use your slope, up if it's positive, down if it's negative, that's your top number, and then always to the right. Do that multiple times so that you get multiple points. You can go the opposite direction, switch those 2 directions to get points going in the other way. And then draw your line through the points and label your graph. So answer your essential question now at the end. What is slope-intercept form of an equation and how do we use it to graph linear equations? So write a paragraph trying to explain the process to someone else that we just learned. And then we'll do more practice in class.